Hello, welcome to Oceanic Oracle. My name is Ari and today I'm going to be going through my January wrap-up. I am going to be filming my January wrap-up and my February TBR simultaneously, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to talk through my feelings on all these books now before playing my game. You'll know the status of my TBR game before I play it because I need to do that. If you aren't aware, I started my new TBR game, which I still need to come up with a name for. I have a few ideas, but I need to flush them out a bit more. I drew 7 cards at the end of December, so the start of January. And I'm going to go through all the books that I read and tell you if I achieved all the prompts that I needed to. So I guess we should get started. To start off the year, I was actually continuing a book that I was reading in the end of December last year. So I started it on the 30th of December and I didn't finish it before the new year. That book being The Night Circus. If you've seen my TBR game, if you haven't, I'm going to be linking it up in the eye in the corner, so you can check that out if you want to. I explain the rules of my game. In the game, I actually drew this card, so Everyday Magic, and I had assigned this to another book, but I realised that it actually fit this book as well. So I shifted the card and made it stick with The Night Circus because I didn't know if I was going to end up reading the book I had initially given this prompt for. But yes, I assigned my green card to The Night Circus. This is magical realism. It's a historical fantasy magical realism romance. That's supposed to be putting it. There are like 3 genres in one. It's a slow-paced book. The writing is really whimsical and honestly, I think it's absolutely stunning. I love this. It's just what I needed in a book to start off the year. I was just really feeling it. It has like mystery, you get adventures, and it's just like, it's a romantic atmosphere. It's very good. I love the writing in this. This book follows 2 rival magicians who you can see on the cover. These 2 are actually put into a battle to the death duel that they know about, and they had no choice to actually partake in. They were just designated that they were going to be taking part in it because their teachers thought, why not? Our 2 characters have the Night Circus, which is a circus that only appears at night. The circus is their stage for this duel. So in one event, they'll conjure up one tent and the next week someone's conjured up another tent. And all the characters are sort of linked to it. There's romance, so it's sort of like a rivals to lovers romance. So if you're into that, I definitely recommend it. If you like whimsical books, if you like historical fiction, so this takes place in the 1800s, the late 1800s, and there's also a mix of second perspective and third perspective. A second perspective being you. There are some bits in the book referring to you as the reader. I just really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. If you're interested, definitely go pick it up. I think it was just fantastic. So here we go. So that was for Everyday Magic. The next book that I read in January was Pride, Prejudice and Other Flavours. So this is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, if you couldn't figure it out from the title. It takes place in San Francisco. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge on the cover. It was great fun. This is sort of a gender-bent retelling. So the girl in this book, Trisha, is Darcy, and the male in this book, DJ, who ironically is named Darcy, is actually Elizabeth, although their families are still sort of like the same. So Trisha's family has like the large Bennett household, whereas DJ's family emulates more of the Darcy's family. So Trisha in this book is a renowned neurosurgeon, and she's actually treating DJ's sister. She has an issue regarding her brain and needs surgery to help sort it out. DJ in this book is a chef. So there is actually a recipe in the back of this book that I've tried and it tasted quite nice. And it's about their dynamic. So DJ is sort of come from nothing, and Trisha's always had everything sort of given to her. And it's about, again, it's Pride and Prejudice. So it's about that dynamic between the 2 of them and them learning and accepting their flaws and moving on from them. That's one of the reasons I really enjoyed it, is that the characters actually develop their flaws and like acknowledge that they are flawed and are able to move on learning from these flaws. I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the sort of Bollywood-esque story, and the atmosphere was just, it was just really, really, like, it was nice. It just makes me want to read more from this author. She has written like a book for Persuasion, which is her next one in the series, and I am probably going to pick that up at some point, but I'm on a book buying ban, so or at least I'm trying to be on a book buying ban, so we'll see if I actually get it. This is just a great book, and if you are in any way, like if you like Pride and Prejudice, or if you're sort of intimidated by Pride and Prejudice, I think this is a good book to start with. It does have similar story beats to Pride and Prejudice. I mean, it being a Pride and Prejudice retelling, you can sort of get it. If you are sort of intimidated by the Jane Austen books, I think this is a good place to sort of like start, maybe dip your toe in to see if you're interested in sort of the family dynamics of the Bennet family and the Darcys. I really like it. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. And the card that I got from that is BIPOC representation. So I achieved that too. The next book that I read in the month of January was It's in His Kiss. This is the 7th book in the Bridgerton series. This was a reread for me, and this book was to fit my pink card here, Heart Don't Fail Me. So this book, it follows Hyacinth, who is the youngest in the Bridgerton family. This is her book. It's quite nice because this was my first reread of the year. I found this really fitting for me because I first read the whole Bridgerton series in January last year after, you know, the show came out. So it was fitting that I reread a Bridgerton book this year, like in January. I really enjoy Hyacinth's book. It's one of my favorites of the series. There are sort of contextual issues that tends to happen. Like, it's one of my pet peeves about American authors who write about historical periods in like Britain, because certain certain mannerisms are very Americanized, and it just wouldn't make sense for like a British family to say them. There are definitely some things that actively sort of took me out of it upon rereading that I didn't notice the first time. It's hard to describe because unless you have lived in the UK or you come from a British family, you probably won't notice them. But for me, I was sort of taken out. Like, one of them happened in the first few chapters, and I was just like, oh my god, like what the like, I noticed these things, and it's all very personal. So I'm sure if you're American you wouldn't notice and it would be fine for you, but as someone who is British, it was noticeable and it drew me out. And that's sort of the reason I didn't give it the full 5 stars, because it was a 4.75 stars. But that's fine. I did really like the journey that both Hyacinth and the main male character Gareth went on. Hyacinth is sort of seen to society as an unmarriable woman. She's just loud and boisterous, and she speaks her opinion. So the men don't want to marry her. Cue eye rolls because they don't see her as marriage material. I mean, who would want a strong woman who speaks her opinion, right? Who would want that? It's commentary on men and their sort of treatment of like women, particularly strong females in that period. But that's a topic for another day. I love her no-nonsense attitude. I find her really endearing, and she has like the sort of classic baby sibling of the family syndrome, because she needs to be as loud as possible to be noticed. That just makes me appreciate her relationship with Gareth. Gareth is the main male lead in this book, and he is just like, he is great. I know, something about him is just like, I just really enjoy reading him, how Hyacinth views him. He's just like, if you know, you know. And Gareth thinks that Hyacinth is sort of like his grandmother, Lady Danbury, like, but in a 23-year-old form, which is fair enough. I mean, Hyacinth does go and chats with Lady Danbury quite a lot in the book, and it's just chef's kiss. It's great. Once Gareth falls for Hyacinth, he there's no looking back. Like, once he actively recognizes that he's fallen for her. There's a plot line in the story regarding a heist, and this heist is just like top tier. I just love the heist plot line, and I think the pair of them are just like, they just complement each other so well, and I just really enjoyed that romance. So it's my historical fiction romance that I read. The next card is one of my brown cards, and it is Until the Last Petal Falls, which is to read a fairy tale retelling. For that card I read Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This is a fairy tale retelling for The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. I believe in my TBR video I actually said that this was by the Brothers Grimm. It's not. This is an East Asian retelling, so it's been inspired by like East Asia. I believe this one's mostly inspired by Japanese culture. This was really fast paced. It was adventurous. There was mystery. That plot twist at the end, I had no idea what was coming, and it was just absolutely fantastic. The first few chapters were a bit hard for me to read, but I think that's purely because it's doing like world building. Sometimes the first few chapters can sort of like slow down. Even though it's like interesting, it can still be a bit slow, if that makes sense. This is a YA fantasy, so it's not really gruesome or anything. What I really enjoyed about this book is that for the majority of the book, our main character Shiori cannot actually communicate, like speak. She can gesture, she can do lots of other things, but she cannot speak for a good majority of it, because if she speaks, as in with I think the Wild Swans, if she so much as utters a word, then one of her 6 brothers who have been turned into cranes die. One crane dies for every word that she speaks. And I think this aspect was just really creative. The way that Elizabeth Lim actually told the story was really creative. I cannot wait for the sequel that comes out this year. Like, I'm so excited for this. I'm glad I put it on my anticipated releases, because I just can't wait to continue on. There's so much going on. There's lots of stuff regarding like East Asian mythology that is acknowledged and talked about. One thing I should say, this book takes place in a land where magic has been banned, and Shiori, she's the only daughter of the emperor, and she has forbidden magic, and she doesn't know what to do with it. She actually folds a little paper crane, you can sort of see on the cover. She folds her and gives her life, and that crane becomes her companion for the rest of her story. It's absolutely beautiful. I think if you're interested in sort of like a fairy tale retelling, a YA fantasy, a really well thought out structure and magic system, definitely check this out. I think this is absolutely fantastic, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Next book that I have on here is The Cat Who Saved Books. This was for my translated fiction card. I really enjoyed this book. I read this in one sitting. It was a really intriguing book. It was sort of like, it's not slow, but it's not fast, so like medium paced. It's a mysterious book. It's not so much lighthearted. It is quite reflective, because you as the reader are going along on this journey. You follow our main character's grandfather has just died, and this is the story of him sort of like coming to terms with grief. Like, grief looks different for everyone, so this is sort of like him coming to terms with grief, and it's the story of how he moves on with his life after that. And it's about this bookshop that this boy's grandfather owned, and the boy basically lived in the bookshop for like all of his life. And it's about their relationship, as well as the boy Natsuki's relationship with this bookstore, as well as his everyday life. An aunt who he has never met has come to actually look after him, so she's going to be moving him. This whole story takes place over a week, I think. And while all this stuff is happening, Natsuki sort of like retreats into this bookshop because it's the only thing he knows. He has 2 classmates who turn up, and they sort of like check on him because he's not been at school. One day a cat walks in, this ginger tabby cat, and the cat speaks to him, and they end up going on an adventure trying to save books. This book is split into 4 parts, and there are 4 different labyrinths that he must navigate. It's just really impactful. It's a beautiful story, and I'm so glad I read it. And I think if you have time, you can definitely knock this out in like an afternoon. It's only 200 pages, and I think lots of people would gain quite a lot from it. It talks about how different people can handle grief, and I think it's important to read that, especially in today's day and age. This is sort of like literary fiction, so if you're not into literary fiction, this might not be for you. I was crying at the end of it, okay? Like, there's so much, and it's just like, it's like very emotional, so there we go. Book number 6 that I picked up was Pachinko. This book is for my long ago card, read a historical fiction. This classifies. Not only does this book fit historical fiction, but this was also recommended to me by my lovely cousin. She recommended this to me as part of my 12 books for 12 months. So that is book 1 of that done. This is a historical fiction, and it's a multi-generational story about a family of Koreans who moved to Japan. This girl Sunja, so she meets a wealthy Yakuza member, and she doesn't actually know he's part of the Yakuza. She lives on an island near Busan. It's about their relationship, so she gets pregnant. He offers her money to be his mistress because she doesn't know that he's actually married. So when she finds out that he's actually married, she's puts her foot down and says no. While this is happening, a minister who was actually traveling from Pyongyang to Osaka stays at their family's inn, and he offers to marry her and to give the child his name because women weren't allowed to give their child their name. They had to give them their father's name, you know, because we live in a patriarchal society. It takes you on a journey from the starting point in Sunja's life, and it goes through her children and her grandchildren, as well as talking about her mother. I think it was a beautiful story. I think that if you are looking to read a East Asian historical fiction, definitely pick this up. There are some trigger warnings, so if you want to look into those, I recommend looking on Storygraph. They actually list quite a lot of triggers. So this goes for all books. I think Storygraph actually does a really good idea because it actually refers to readers and what they view. So if you want to look at trigger warnings for any of these books, check out Storygraph. I was so emotional, and it takes you on so many twists and turns. There are so many things that you just didn't expect. Obviously this is sort of modeled off of real life, so it's not like a happily ever after. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I'm glad I read it. It's got 4 stars. The next book that I have for my wrap up is The Bear and the Nightingale. And this fit my the wild outdoors card that I drew. I love this book. This is my first 5-star read of the year. I'm so happy I read this. So as my card states, this is a fantasy book that takes place primarily outside. A big part of this book actually takes place in these woods in northern Russia. It is a historical fiction fantasy book. It talks about the relationship between religion as well as folklore. So in this book, quite a big part of this book focuses on Christianity and how it was interpreted in this village. I love this story. It talks about Russian folklore, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm a folklore nerd. I love myth and I like folklore. It's just really interesting to me, and I loved the characters in here. This was a good mix of both the plot and the characters. The pacing was medium. It wasn't fast, it wasn't slow. So you got where you were going. It didn't trail off, so losing steam. The characters were really great, and I just I felt for all of them. I have filmed a vlog of my reaction. It's in my TBR PG-a-thon vlog, which I'm assuming is going to be going up, so I will link to that as well if you're interested in seeing my thoughts as I was going. This book was just stunning. I love the writing. It was very beautiful. The story doesn't actually follow one single main character. It follows a whole group of them, and you get a sort of multiple perspectives from all of them. Vasilisa is a witch. For all intents and purposes, I'm just gonna call her a witch because that's easier. She has this ability, and she's able to see spirits, and not everyone possesses this ability. She possesses it, and the woman who her father ends up marrying as his second wife also possesses this ability. Her father's second wife, so her stepmother, thinks that she's crazy. She doesn't believe that they're actually there. She thinks they're all demons, and basically Christianity gives her an out. She thinks she's mad. She thinks she's crazy. This book really talks about and it breaks down the sort of like impact that religion had on like local folklore and the relationship we had, like people had with their local spirits or spirits they believed like were around. And I think it's just a really interesting discussion. This fantasy book also doesn't have romance in it, so if you aren't a fan of fantasy romance, no need to worry. You should definitely pick this up. I think it's fantastic. I am excited to continue with this series, and there we go. So that was my first 5-star of the year. This next book is one that doesn't have a card, but I had to read it for book club, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read and listened to an Audible version of this, so I listened to one that's available on Audible Plus and narrated by Dan Stevens. If you don't know who Dan Stevens is, you might know him from the Beauty and the Beast like retelling with Emma Watson. He was also in Downton Abbey, that's what I know him from. He's absolutely fantastic. He's a great narrator. Frankenstein, as I'm sure most people are aware of, Frankenstein is the story of Victor Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. This book is really like, it's a go book. Like, it's really fast paced. It was really interesting for me because I've actually been like, I starred in Frankenstein at my school. We performed Frankenstein in year 12, which is like second to last year of school here. I played DeLacy in this play. It was really interesting because I was as I was reading it, I was comparing my recollection of the story and the plot lines compared with what was going on in the book. The book is split into 3 sections, so you hear the story of Victor, then you hear the story from Frankenstein's monster, and then you hear like the combination at the end. This book is fantastic. If you're looking to read like science fiction, one of the reasons that we have science fiction is the lovely Mary Shelley. So if you're interested in reading a classic in that aspect, definitely check this out. I really appreciate her writing. If you haven't read Mary Shelley, you should definitely go and read her, like read Frankenstein. It's definitely worth it. It's quick. It won't take you too long. And I just think it's a really good book. Anyway, that was my book club book, and that's finished. If you didn't know, I took part in TBR PG-a-thon. I took part in that in like the 3rd week of January. In that readathon, I had 2 more prompts. So those were all the books for prompts that I drew. So I have 2 books that sort of don't have prompts related to like cards, but this one sort of works because One Last Stop was the original book that I was going to read for my Everyday Magic prompt. So it was only fitting that I read it. This is Casey McQuiston's 2nd book. They wrote Red, White and Royal Blue, which is the book that everyone sort of knows and I'm sure lots of people love. It's one of my favourite books of all time. I absolutely love this book. So when I saw One Last Stop in stores, I had to pick it up and I had to read it. This came out in June 2021 and I hadn't picked it up yet. This book follows August, the redhead you can sort of see on the cover. She's a bisexual woman who has just moved to New York. It's about her life in the city, her life with her roommates, and every day as she's going to work or school, she takes the Q train for both. And one day, like her first day of school, she's walking along with a coffee and someone knocks into her and spills it all over her. And that's when she bumps into this girl, Jane, on the Q train. Jane offers her a scarf to cover it up, and August instantly has a crush on her. And this is about their relationship and how she actually realises that Jane's actually from the 1970s and she's been stuck on this train forever. Jane also doesn't really remember anything of her life before being stuck on this train for years and years and years. All of Jane's belongings are really sort of like retro, old-fashioned. So she has a cassette player, she has a radio, she has what she can get from around the train, and she has no idea why she's stuck. So this story sort of follows their relationship with each other, as well as the bigger picture as to how on earth did Jane get stuck on this Q train and how can we get her out of this loop. It's a really good book, and I think if you're interested in sort of like time and plays on time, this is definitely one for you. It's definitely like a contemporary urban fantasy, so like I'm glad I read it. Hopefully I can read this next month because I'm in the mood for a reread of Red, White and Royal Blue. Also, side note, has anyone seen like the hardback, like there's been a hardback announced for Red, White and Royal Blue, and I think I'm gonna have to pick it up because there's a chapter from Henry's point of view. I love Henry. Like, that's not coming out till August this year, so I have to wait for that. But anyway, I think I gave this 4 stars. Nice romance, and nice queer romance. If you're into, like, if you want to read a queer sapphic romance with like fantasy elements to it, I recommend it. Last and certainly not least, I have the last book that I read for TBRPG-a-thon. So this book is Batgirl of Burnside. I have had this comic since my second last year at school. I've loved Batgirl for like quite a long time. I always love superheroes. I mean, you can see I have my spider monkey Funko Pop in the background, but I have loved Batgirl and the Bat family for a long time, since like I think I was 14 when I probably saw my first superhero cartoon on Cartoon Network. We didn't have Cartoon Network, and I watched it when I went on a school trip to New Zealand, and I saw it on TV and I just fell in love with Robin, my first Robin, aka Richard Grayson. I was obsessed with all things from that. Like I watched Young Justice, and I'm sure for me season 3 doesn't exist. Like, season 1 of Young Justice is one of my favorite shows of all time. I love Batgirl. She's not in season 1 of Young Justice, but I also watched The Batman, which was a cartoon that came out in 2006 as well. I actually own the first season on my laptop. It's just fantastic. And in the 3rd season of The Batman, Batgirl actually gets introduced as a sidekick because Robin was actually owned by another Cartoon Network show. I'm sure you've heard of it, Teen Titans. You can ship whoever you want to ship with Robin, but for me, Robin will always be with Batgirl. That's the ship that I will die on. So I got this in like my second to last year of school. This came out in 2015, and that's the year that I got this. The funny thing is that I hadn't actually read the whole complete thing all the way through. I picked this up because it fit one of the prompts, and I read it all the way through, and it just makes me want to go back and watch Young Justice. I want to go and watch The Batman again because I love these characters. Barbara Gordon, who is Batgirl, if you didn't know, surprise. She is a great character, and I want to emulate her energy. She's just she gives such no nonsense attitude, and like top tier. Like, she's great. This book is sort of like set in the modern day, and it involves like phones and everything, and just like, it's just a really good book. And the art style in this is absolutely fantastic. Let me find a page. There's that one. But one of my favorite pieces in this whole thing is that, like, I just love the art style. I think the illustration's great. I loved the story, and I loved how it was split. If you like comics, if you like superheroes, definitely check out Batgirl of Burnside. This whole series, it's great. There we go. That is the end of my wrap up for January. Gosh, I haven't filmed one of these in a long time. Conclusions. I have read and received all of the cards that I was playing for, which is good, because I didn't know how much time I was actually going to have this month. So I've read all the cards and all the prompts, so that means the ones that are in the set I can have the bonuses. So particularly like my green set, I have something that says swap here, so I can swap books if I want for my 2 cards. When I film my February TBR, I will keep them in the background so you will be able to see. It's just so exciting. I am looking forward to seeing what I draw for February, and I can't wait to share what I get with all of you. I hope you've also enjoyed going through what I've read. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want more bookish content. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, depending on when you're watching this, and I will see you in my next video, which will be my February TBR. Bye!